I'm Alex Thompson, 32 years old, and I always thought growing up in Seattle meant I had the perfect family. My grandfather William was the one person who truly saw me, always promising that someday his business empire and $5 million fortune would be mine. When he passed, I never expected the words that would come out of my father's mouth. "You're not ready for this responsibility, Alex. We're giving everything to Rebecca." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The betrayal cut deep, but what my parents didn't know was that my career as a corporate lawyer had prepared me perfectly for this moment. I found documents that would change everything. If you're joining me on this journey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me to see how uncovering the hidden trust fund gave me back more than just my inheritance. I grew up in a sprawling modern house in Bellevue, Washington, where the evergreen trees and misty mornings framed our family's seemingly picture-perfect life. My grandfather William lived just 20 minutes away in a stunning lakeside property where he had built his technology consulting business from nothing. He was a remarkable man who had started with a small IT firm in the 1980s, growing it into a regional powerhouse while investing wisely in early tech startups that multiplied his wealth exponentially. From my earliest memories, Grandpa William and I shared a special bond. While my parents attended every one of my sister Rebecca's dance recitals and academic competitions, Grandpa would take me hiking through Olympic National Park, to technology conventions, and on impromptu business trips where I absorbed his wisdom like a sponge. "Your mind is your greatest asset, Alex," he would tell me, his eyes crinkling with pride when I asked insightful questions about his business dealings. "Rebecca may have your parents' attention, but you and I understand what truly matters in this world: vision, strategy, and integrity." Rebecca was 2 years older than me, with our mother's perfect poise and our father's natural charisma. She glided through school with excellent grades and exceptional social status, while I buried myself in debate team, business club, and advanced placement courses. Our parents never missed an opportunity to showcase Rebecca's achievements. Her perfect SAT score, her acceptance to Princeton, her summer internships at prestigious firms, all displayed prominently during family gatherings. My academic achievements and entrepreneurial ventures were acknowledged with quick, distracted nods before conversation inevitably returned to Rebecca's latest accomplishment. I learned to find validation in Grandpa William's approving smile when I showed him my business plans or shared my dreams of following in his footsteps. "You're so much like me," he would say, showing me his meticulously kept business records and collection of rare first-edition business books that represented his intellectual journey. "You have the instinct for opportunity that can't be taught." When I was 17, during one of our Saturday afternoon strategy sessions in his home office overlooking Lake Washington, Grandpa took my hand and said something I would never forget. "Alex, when I'm gone, all of this will be yours. My business, my investments, this house, everything that matters. Not because you're my only granddaughter, but because you're the only one who truly understands what it took to build it all. Rebecca is brilliant, but she doesn't have the fire that you and I share." I didn't fully understand the significance of his words then, but they gave me comfort during the lonely college years, when Rebecca's graduation from Princeton dominated our family's social media, while my full scholarship to Stanford Law School was mentioned as an afterthought at family dinners. After graduating with honors and passing the bar exam on my first attempt, I secured a position at a prestigious corporate law firm in San Francisco. The irony wasn't lost on me that the skills I was developing, scrutinizing contracts, understanding trust laws, detecting financial irregularities, would eventually become my greatest weapons in the battle I didn't yet know was coming. Meanwhile, Rebecca floated between impressive-sounding roles at various nonprofit organizations, always with glamorous titles but vague responsibilities. Despite her professional instability, our parents continued to support her emotionally and, I would later discover, financially. Her luxury apartment in Manhattan, her frequent international work trips, and her designer wardrobe far exceeded what her nonprofit salary could possibly cover. Every family video call featured updates on Rebecca's latest networking triumph or social justice initiative, with minimal interest in my steadily advancing legal career or the modest but growing investment portfolio I had built on my own. Through it all, my weekly calls with Grandpa William remained my emotional anchor. As he entered his early 80s, our relationship gradually shifted. I began helping him review contracts, offering legal perspectives when he asked, and flying home monthly to help organize his affairs. During these years, he would occasionally remind me of his promise, showing me where important documents were kept and explaining the structure of his various business entities. "The core holding company owns everything," he once told me while showing me a complex organizational chart. "And someday, you'll control it all." Those quiet moments with Grandpa, learning about his business empire and financial wisdom, were preparing me for a future confrontation I couldn't have imagined. Grandpa William's health began to decline shortly after his 84th birthday. What started as occasional forgetfulness progressed to concerning heart issues requiring frequent monitoring. As his energy decreased, I adjusted my work schedule to spend 1 week per month at his house, helping manage his business affairs, organizing his medications, and simply keeping him company. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Rebecca, despite living only a 3-hour flight away, visited perhaps once every 2 months, usually when our parents mentioned they would be stopping by as well. "Don't worry about Rebecca," Grandpa would say when I expressed frustration at her absence. "She takes after your mother." Never could sit still long enough to understand what building something truly means. He'd wink, but I could see the disappointment beneath his humor. On a rainy October afternoon during my 4th year at the law firm, Grandpa asked me to drive him to his attorney's office. "It's time to finalize my estate plan," he explained as I helped him into my car. "I want to make sure everything is perfectly clear." I sat quietly in the corner of the attorney's office as Grandpa spoke with Ms. Patel, his lawyer of 25 years. "I want to be explicit that my granddaughter, Alex Thompson, receives control of my entire business empire," he stated firmly. "The holding company, all subsidiary businesses, investment portfolios, and especially this house. My son James and his wife have been provided for through generous gifts over the years, and my granddaughter Rebecca has received substantial financial support for her education and various endeavors." Ms. Patel nodded, making notes. "And you're certain about this distribution, Mr. Thompson? No provisions for your son or other granddaughter?" Grandpa's voice was unwavering. "Alexandra is the only one who has shown genuine interest in preserving what I've built. She spent years learning the business, understanding our investment strategy, and has helped manage everything with respect and care. This isn't about favoritism. It's about entrusting everything to the person who will truly value it." On the drive home, Grandpa reached over and patted my hand. "I've also established a special trust that only you and I know about," he said. $5 million, completely separate from the business. It's our little insurance policy, in case things get complicated." I tried to protest, uncomfortable discussing his mortality, but he silenced me with a gentle squeeze of my hand. "It's all arranged, dear. The trust is hidden within a complex structure that only you can access with information I'll give you before I'm gone. Just promise me you'll use some of it to finally launch that legal tech startup you've been dreaming about since law school." As his condition worsened, I began spending more time working remotely from his house, rushing to make important client calls after ensuring his morning nurse had arrived. My supervisor at the firm, understanding my situation, allowed me flexible arrangements. But the exhaustion of balancing full-time legal work with caregiving began to take its toll. My parents visited weekly, bringing prepared meals and staying for exactly 90 minutes before citing other commitments. During these visits, I noticed my mother scanning the room, her eyes lingering on Grandpa's rare book collection and the original Chihuly glass sculpture in his foyer. Once, I overheard her telling my father, "Dad really should consider moving to that luxury retirement community we looked at. This house is too much to maintain, and those valuables should be properly insured and stored elsewhere." When I mentioned this to Grandpa, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Promise me you won't let them change anything. This house stays exactly as it is until it passes to you." The winter was particularly harsh that year, and pneumonia sent Grandpa to the hospital 2 days after Thanksgiving. I took emergency leave from work, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside his bed for 13 nights. Rebecca visited twice, spending most of the time in the hallway on video calls with her colleagues. My parents rotated shifts during daytime hours but insisted I remain overnight since I didn't have important commitments like they did with their country club events, or Rebecca with her fundraising galas. On December 12th, with snow falling gently outside the hospital window, Grandpa William passed away while holding my hand. His last words to me were barely audible. "Remember what's in the red folder in my desk." Second drawer. False bottom. In the haze of grief that followed, I handled the funeral arrangements with minimal input from my parents, who seemed preoccupied with getting the house in order and inventorying valuables almost immediately after Grandpa's passing. At the funeral, I noticed my mother wearing Grandpa's platinum Patek Philippe watch, something that made my stomach tighten with unease. Rebecca delivered a brief, generic eulogy that could have described any grandfather, never mentioning his business acumen, his passion for mentoring young entrepreneurs, or his philanthropic work with technology education in underserved communities. As I stood at the cemetery watching his casket being lowered into the ground, I felt utterly alone in my grief, clutching a small key I had retrieved from the red folder in Grandpa's desk. Inside the folder was a handwritten letter detailing the secret $5 million trust, its complex ownership structure, and the offshore account numbers, with my name as the sole signatory. "This information is for you alone," he had written. "Trust your instincts and remember that financial independence is the foundation of all other freedoms." 2 weeks after we laid Grandpa William to rest, our family gathered at Ms. Patel's law office for the official reading of the will. The room felt smaller than I remembered, with modernist furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. My father sat stiffly in an ergonomic chair, my mother beside him fidgeting with Grandpa's watch on her wrist. Rebecca slouched elegantly in her seat, occasionally checking her phone despite Ms. Patel's pointed glances. I had dressed carefully that morning in a navy blue suit, the same one I wore to important court appearances, drawing strength from the professional armor. As Ms. Patel prepared to begin, my father abruptly cleared his throat. "Before we start, we should discuss how we'll be handling Dad's estate," he announced in the authoritative tone he typically reserved for his executive board meetings. "As executor, I'll be managing the distribution of assets, and we've made some decisions as a family." Ms. Patel paused, fountain pen hovering over the document. "I believe that's why we're here today, Mr. Thompson, to review your father's wishes regarding his estate." My father waved his hand dismissively. Yes, but as executor, I'll be overseeing how everything is distributed, and we've decided on a more appropriate approach." This was the first I'd heard of my father being executor, and confusion bloomed in my chest. Grandpa had explicitly told me he had named me as executor during our visit to this very office. Before I could speak, my mother jumped in. "We feel it's best for the family if we handle things our way rather than following some instructions William might have left when he wasn't thinking clearly." His mental state was deteriorating rapidly in those final months. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I processed her words. Ms. Patel's expression remained professionally neutral, but I noticed her eyebrows inch upward. "Mrs. Thompson, I assure you William was of sound mind when he updated his will last October. Perhaps we should proceed with the reading to clarify his intentions." My mother's smile tightened. "Of course, but James will be making the final decisions regardless. We're simply making things right for the entire family." My stomach nodded as Ms. Patel began reading, confirming exactly what Grandpa had told me. The entirety of his business holdings, investments, and property was to pass to me, with specific mention of my, quote, "demonstrated business acumen and commitment to continuing William's legacy." I was named executor, not my father. As Ms. Patel continued reading, my father's face reddened, and my mother's knuckles whitened around her designer handbag. When the attorney finished, an uncomfortable silence filled the room until my father spoke. "Well, that's Dad's opinion, but we'll be handling things differently. The business will be restructured and managed by a professional board that I'll chair, and the proceeds will be distributed more appropriately among the family." My voice, when I finally found it, came out steadier than I expected. That's not what Grandpa wanted. He was very clear about his wishes, both in the will and to me personally. My mother turned to me with a coldness I'd never seen directed my way before. "Alexandra, you've always been so calculating. Did it ever occur to you that your grandfather wasn't thinking rationally? That he was manipulated during his vulnerable final years by the person spending the most time with him?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Manipulated? I was caring for him while everyone else was too busy. my father cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. That's enough, Alexandra. We've decided. The business will be restructured under my leadership, and the assets will primarily benefit Rebecca. She has important connections and social standing that will benefit from proper financial support. You have your law career and comfortable salary. Rebecca finally looked up from her phone, the beginning of a smug smile playing at the corner of her mouth. It just makes sense, Alex. You've got your fancy law degree and Silicon Valley connections. I'm trying to make actual change in the world, and that requires resources. I turned to Ms. Patel, desperately seeking an ally. This can't be legal. The will is clear. She shifted uncomfortably. While the will expresses Mr. Thompson's intentions, if the family agrees to an alternative distribution and the executor approves, which I do, my father interrupted. It's settled, Miss Patel finished, not meeting my eyes. The room spun around me as I tried to process what was happening. But Grandpa named me executor, not Dad. My mother stood abruptly, gathering her coat. James has power of attorney from before your grandfather's passing. We've already begun the process of transferring assets. The Chihuly sculpture has been moved to our home for proper display, and we've started cataloging the book collection for appraisal and potential auction. I felt as though I'd been plunged into ice water. You took his art, his books? Those pieces were specifically mentioned in the will as coming to me. My mother's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. You're not ready for this responsibility, Alexandra. You've always thought you were better than this family, with your prestigious degree and corporate ambitions. Rebecca needs this more than you do. Her work has real social impact. I turned to my sister, searching for any sign of discomfort with this betrayal, but found only thinly veiled satisfaction. My father stood, signaling the end of the discussion. It's decided. I'll handle the business restructuring and distribution of assets. Rebecca will receive the primary financial benefits as an investment in her future and her important work. As we exited the office, Rebecca hung back, placing her hand on my shoulder in a gesture of false sympathy. Don't worry, Alex. I'll let you borrow the Chihuly for special occasions, she whispered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I shrugged her hand away, too stunned to form a coherent response. In the parking lot, I watched my parents and sister climb into their respective luxury vehicles. Rebecca's a brand new Tesla I hadn't seen before, while I stood alone with the devastating realization that the family I thought I knew had been an illusion. The small key in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, a final message from the only family member who had truly seen me for who I was. The drive back to my San Francisco apartment passed in a blur of highway exits and traffic lights, tears occasionally blurring my vision as the reality of what had just happened sank deeper into my consciousness. By the time I unlocked my door and stepped inside, the emotional weight had become physical, and I collapsed onto my sofa, still wearing my coat. For 3 days, I barely left my apartment, calling in sick to work for the first time in my career. My phone filled with increasingly impatient texts from my parents, asking when I would stop being dramatic and accept the family's decision. Rebecca sent a single message, a photo of Grandpa's prized first edition copy of The Intelligent Investor, now placed on her coffee table with the caption, "Thanks for understanding, sis." I alternated between periods of numb disbelief and crushing grief, not just for Grandpa, whose wishes were being blatantly disregarded, but for the loss of my family as I had understood them to be. Every memory from childhood suddenly required re-examination through this new lens of betrayal. Had my parents always resented my connection with Grandpa? Had my academic and professional achievements only widened a gulf of disapproval I hadn't fully recognized? On the 4th day, I forced myself to shower, change clothes, and attempt to regain some semblance of normal functioning. My closest friend Zoe came over with takeout and listened as I recounted the events at the lawyer's office. "That can't possibly be legal," she insisted, outrage coloring her voice. "They can't just ignore a will because they feel like it." Her indignation awakened something in me, a sense that perhaps this wasn't just a painful family matter, but a legal one with potential remedies. I called Miss Patel's office the following morning, but her receptionist informed me she couldn't discuss the case further as my father had officially retained her on behalf of the estate. This revelation sent me spiraling again. realizing how thoroughly my parents had orchestrated this takeover. When I finally returned to work the following week, I struggled to focus on client cases and legal briefs, while my own inheritance was being systematically redirected. My supervisor noticed my distraction during a partner meeting and pulled me aside. "Whatever's going on, Alex, you need to either resolve it or compartmentalize it. Your work is suffering." That night, I tried one last attempt at reasoning with my parents, calling their home phone since they had begun ignoring my texts. My mother answered, her voice immediately cooling when she recognized me. "Alexandra, we've been through this. The decision is final." "But it's not what Grandpa wanted," I insisted, hating the pleading note in my voice. "He specifically updated his will to make his wishes clear." My mother's response cut deeper than I could have anticipated. "Your grandfather wasn't in his right mind in those final months. You took advantage of his confusion and isolation to manipulate him into changing his will. We're simply correcting an injustice." The accusations struck like a physical blow. "That's not true. I loved him. I cared for him when no one else would." "You always did have a talent for revisionist history," my mother replied coldly. "Rebecca visited regularly and has always maintained proper family relationships, while you've been obsessed with your career and independence. Family legacy belongs with someone who values family, not someone who's been pulling away since college." After hanging up, I sat in my dark apartment, replaying her words. The stark reversal of reality, casting my caregiving as manipulation and Rebecca's occasional appearances as devotion, left me questioning my own memories. The gaslighting was so effective that for a moment I wondered if I had somehow misunderstood Grandpa's intentions, despite his explicit statements. 2 weeks later, an Instagram notification caught my attention. Rebecca posing in front of the Eiffel Tower with the caption, "Expanding our organization's European outreach. So grateful for the family support making this possible." The casual mention of family support confirmed they had already begun redirecting Grandpa's assets. That same evening, my father sent a group text announcing the, quote, "successful transition of William's business interests, with proceeds invested appropriately for the family's future security." No details were provided about these investments, but the implication was clear. Rebecca was the primary beneficiary. I forwarded the Instagram post to Zoe with the caption, "Guess who's funding this, quote, business trip?" Her response was immediate. "You need to fight this. Not just for the money, but because it's wrong." Other friends echoed this sentiment as I gradually shared the situation with my inner circle. My law school roommate Jasmine, now a probate attorney, was particularly adamant. "There are laws to prevent exactly this kind of thing. You need to consult an actual estate attorney who represents you, not your family." Still, I hesitated. Fighting my family in court would mean permanently fracturing relationships that, despite this betrayal, represented my only blood connections in the world. What would holidays look like after legal action? Would the extended family I'd grown up with choose sides? The emotional toll mounted as weeks passed. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and found myself unable to concentrate on novels or shows that had previously provided escape. My performance review at work noted a, quote, "concerning decline in attention to detail and reduced client engagement." One particularly dark night, sitting on my apartment floor surrounded by old photo albums, I nearly convinced myself to let it all go, to accept the loss of both inheritance and family rather than prolong the pain with legal battles. I texted Zoe, "Maybe I should just move on. Is it worth destroying what's left of my family?" Her response arrived minutes later. "The people who could say you're not ready for this responsibility to their own daughter have already destroyed the family. Now it's about justice for your grandfather who trusted you to honor his wishes." 3 months after the will reading, a curious thing happened that would completely change my approach to the situation. While organizing my home office, I came across an old birthday card from Grandpa William that I'd saved from my 30th birthday. Inside, beyond his loving message, he had written, "I've set up the special offshore account we discussed. Remember, in times of trouble, true security comes from preparation." I stared at the card, a foggy memory surfacing of Grandpa taking me to his private banker years ago, having me sign some paperwork I hadn't fully understood at the time. With trembling hands, I retrieved the small key from my bedside drawer, carefully reviewing Grandpa's handwritten notes about the secret trust. He had listed 3 primary financial holdings: a Cayman Islands account with approximately $2 million, a Swiss investment portfolio valued at roughly $5 million, and a smaller account in Singapore with around $500,000. According to his notes, I was listed as either the sole beneficiary or direct signatory on all 3. This contradicted everything my parents had implied about their control over his assets. The next morning, I called the private banking number listed in Grandpa's notes, and after verifying my identity with numerous security questions, inquired about any accounts I might be associated with. The representative's response sent a jolt through my body. "Yes, Miss Thompson, you're listed as the sole signatory on a trust established by William Thompson. However, I'm seeing some unusual activity I'd like to discuss. Could you come to our San Francisco office in person?" 2 hours later, I sat across from Mr. De La Cruz, a distinguished private banking manager who reviewed the account details with growing concern. "This trust was set up with explicit instructions that you would be the only person with access," he explained, turning his computer screen so I could see. "That means upon Mr. William Thompson's death, full control would automatically transfer to you. No probate required." He scrolled down to recent transactions. "However, I'm seeing multiple attempts to access these accounts originating from New York City. The attempts included your personal information, but failed our biometric verification protocols. These attempts began approximately 3 weeks after your grandfather's passing." My breath caught. 3 weeks after Grandpa died. Right around when Rebecca had suddenly acquired her new Tesla. Mr. De La Cruz's expression grew serious. "The security team flagged these as potential identity theft attempts. Do you have any idea who might be trying to access these accounts?" Fortunately, I had brought my entire file of Grandpa's documents, including several copies of the death certificate, and his letter explaining the trust structure. Mr. De La Cruz examined them carefully, then picked up his phone. "I need to escalate this to our security department immediately. These access attempts appear highly sophisticated, and we need to ensure your funds remain protected." While Mr. De La Cruz made his calls, I reviewed the investment statements from the Swiss portfolio included in Grandpa's notes. According to the beneficiary designation form, I was named as the primary beneficiary on these investments as well. Yet someone had clearly been attempting to circumvent these protections. With growing confidence, I asked Mr. De La Cruz if he could check if there were any other accounts under William Thompson's name at their institution. His search revealed a safety deposit box registered jointly to William Thompson and Alexandra Thompson. Would this have contained documentation about other assets by chance? I asked, thinking of the business empire my parents had claimed were in their control for restructuring. "We don't track the contents," Mr. De La Cruz replied, "but clients typically use safety deposit boxes for valuables, important documents, or backup access credentials." By the end of that meeting, the bank's security department had placed additional protections on all accounts, requiring in-person verification for any transaction attempts. I had scheduled appointments with both the Swiss bank and the Singapore financial institution for the following week. At the Swiss bank, I discovered that someone had submitted paperwork attempting to change the beneficiary designation on Grandpa's accounts just 2 weeks before his death. Paperwork that their compliance department had flagged as suspicious because the signature didn't match their records. They had sent verification documents to Grandpa's home address, which I realized must have been intercepted by my parents during their frequent check-ins during his final weeks. Because the change was never verified, the original beneficiary designation naming me remained in effect. The Singapore bank revealed similar attempts to transfer funds using what appeared to be a forged power of attorney, which they had flagged for further verification. Once I provided the death certificate and beneficiary documentation, they immediately recognized the attempted fraud and began their own investigation. Over the following 2 weeks, I had daily phone calls with bank representatives, compliance officers, and eventually a financial crimes investigator from the private bank. The picture that emerged was both shocking and validating. Someone, almost certainly my family, had systematically attempted to redirect my grandfather's hidden assets despite his clear wishes and legally binding designations. The most disturbing discovery came when the financial crimes investigator shared copies of the attempted transfer forms with me. The handwriting on the transfer instructions was unmistakably similar to my sister's elegant script, and the signature purporting to be mine authorizing the transfer was clearly forged. "This isn't just a family disagreement anymore," the investigator explained gently. Forgery and fraudulent use of identification documents potentially constitute criminal financial fraud. Armed with documentation from all three financial institutions, I finally scheduled a consultation with an estate attorney specializing in high net worth cases. Ms. Rivera listened attentively as I explained the entire situation, reviewing the bank documents, Grandpa's notes, and the copy of the will I had received from Ms. Patel before my father retained her. "You have a remarkably strong case," she concluded, arranging the documents into organized piles. "Your grandfather took extraordinary measures to ensure his wishes would be carried out, establishing you as the sole beneficiary on these trust accounts, specifically to avoid the complications of probate. The attempts to circumvent these designations using forged documents constitute serious financial misconduct." For the first time since Grandpa's death, I felt a sense of solid ground beneath my feet. The bank's investigations had validated what I knew to be true. Grandpa had wanted me to inherit his assets, had taken legal steps to ensure it would happen, and my family had actively worked to undermine his wishes. As devastating as this confirmation of betrayal was, it also provided a clear path forward. Before leaving Ms. Rivera's office, I asked the question that had been haunting me: how do I confront my family with this information? Her response was measured and strategic. "First, we secure your financial assets through the bank's fraud investigations. Then we prepare a comprehensive case regarding the will and probate assets. Only when our position is unassailable do we approach your family, and when we do, it should be from a position of absolute certainty and strength." On the train ride home, clutching a folder of bank statements and beneficiary designations, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: a sense of my grandfather's presence, as if he had anticipated this betrayal and meticulously prepared me to counter it. The corporate lawyer he had encouraged me to become was now the exact person needed to unravel this web of deception. With the bank's investigations underway and Ms. Rivera building our legal case, I entered a phase of methodical preparation. The lawyer in me took over, creating detailed timelines tracking every account, every attempted transfer, and every contradiction between my parents' claims and the documented reality. Ms. Rivera advised me to communicate minimally with my family during this time, responding to messages with non-committal phrases and avoiding any mention of the financial investigations. "The element of surprise will be crucial," she explained during one of our weekly strategy sessions. "The moment they realize you're building a case, they may attempt to cover their tracks or create alternative narratives." Following her advice, I maintained a facade of reluctant acceptance in my limited interactions with my parents and sister. When my mother texted about donating some of Grandpa's outdated business books to the library since they're just collecting dust, I simply replied, "Do whatever you think is best." This apparent surrender seemed to satisfy them, and the frequency of their messages decreased. Rebecca stopped communicating entirely once she had nothing more to gloat about. Meanwhile, I assembled a comprehensive timeline of events, beginning with Grandpa adding me to his accounts years earlier, and ending with the most recent attempted fraudulent transfers. I gathered phone records showing the hundreds of hours I'd spent at Grandpa's house during his final years, medical records where I was listed as his emergency contact, and receipts from groceries and medications I'd purchased for his care. Ms. Rivera brought in a forensic accountant who specialized in estate disputes to review the financial documentation. His assessment was unequivocal. The pattern here shows deliberate misdirection of assets contrary to the legally established beneficiary designations. The fact that attempts to change these designations began in the weeks before death suggests premeditation. By the end of the second month of investigation, the private bank had not only protected the original funds, but had compiled a comprehensive fraud report documenting the attempted unauthorized access. Their security department provided a formal letter stating they had found compelling evidence of sophisticated fraudulent activity targeting accounts specifically designated for Alex Thompson. The Swiss and Singapore banks followed a similar process, confirming my status as rightful beneficiary and providing documentation of the attempted fraudulent transactions. The financial institution's responses gave Ms. Rivera the leverage she needed to address the probate issues: Grandpa's business empire, which had been restructured, his art collection, which my mother now prominently displayed, and various personal possessions which had been distributed among family members or sold. "Now we need to document every asset we can remember from your grandfather's estate," Ms. Rivera instructed. "Business holdings, art pieces, descriptions, approximate values, anything that helps establish the inventory of the estate that should have passed to you through the will." I spent a weekend creating a detailed catalog of Grandpa's possessions. From the Chihuly sculpture my mother had claimed for proper display to the first edition business books my sister now used as coffee table decor. For items I lacked photos of, I found similar examples online to include as visual references. As this documentation phase continued, the bank representatives and I developed a rapport, with several expressing personal outrage at what had happened. Mr. Dela Cruz at the private bank was particularly supportive, occasionally calling just to check on my well-being and providing updates on their investigation. During one such call, he mentioned something that would prove instrumental. "Our fraud department has completed their review of all accounts associated with your family members, and we found something interesting. It appears your parents have been experiencing financial difficulties for some time. There are multiple over-leveraged investment properties, several maxed-out credit lines, and a pattern of high-risk, high-interest loans over the past 3 years." This information provided crucial context for their desperate actions. A week later, Ms. Rivera's investigator uncovered public records of a pending bankruptcy filing for one of my father's side businesses, a filing dated just 2 weeks after Grandpa's death that mysteriously never proceeded to court. The picture was becoming clearer. My family hadn't just wanted Grandpa's assets out of spite or favoritism. They had needed them to resolve significant financial troubles. This realization brought a strange mix of emotions: a deeper sense of betrayal that they would steal my inheritance to solve their self-created problems, but also a sad understanding of the desperation that might drive such actions. With all financial accounts now secured and substantial evidence compiled regarding the probate assets, Ms. Rivera and I discussed the final approach. "We have 2 options," she explained during a strategy meeting in her office. "We can proceed directly to litigation, filing complaints in probate court and potentially pursuing criminal charges for the fraudulent financial activities. Or we can attempt one final resolution meeting with your family, laying out the evidence and offering settlement terms that avoid a public legal battle." The thought of facing my family across a conference table, armed with evidence of their betrayal, sent a wave of anxiety through me. Yet the alternative, a protracted court battle that would permanently sever any possibility of reconciliation, seemed equally daunting. After careful consideration, I chose the resolution meeting approach. "But it needs to happen on my terms, with my evidence fully presented," I insisted. "I won't be gaslit or manipulated again," Ms. Rivera nodded approvingly. "We'll invite them to my office next week. I'll be present as your legal counsel, and we'll have all documentation prepared in presentation format. You should also be ready for significant emotional reactions: anger, denial, possibly even attempts to reframe you as the villain in this scenario." To prepare for the inevitable emotional turbulence, I scheduled several sessions with a therapist specializing in family estrangement and financial abuse. Dr. Chen helped me process the complex grief of losing my family's trust, while strengthening my resolve to stand firm in the face of potential manipulation. "Your grandfather trusted you for a reason," she reminded me during our final session before the meeting. "Honor that trust by being as strategic and clear-headed as he knew you could be." The night before the scheduled family meeting, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Dela Cruz at the private bank. "Alexandra, our investigation has uncovered something else you should know before tomorrow. We found evidence that your sister has already lost a significant portion of the assets that were diverted to her. Nearly $1.2 million appears to have been invested in a fraudulent art fund that collapsed last month. There are also numerous large transfers to an organization that doesn't appear to actually exist beyond a web presence." This final piece of the puzzle explained so much. Rebecca's determination to control Grandpa's assets wasn't just about her important work or my parents' financial troubles. It was also about funding her lavish lifestyle and making increasingly desperate investments to maintain appearances. As I prepared for bed that night, I found myself looking at an old photo of Grandpa William from his 80th birthday. His eyes held the same determination I now felt coursing through me. "I won't let them take what you wanted me to have," I whispered to his image. "And I won't let them rewrite who you were or what you wanted." The strategic preparation was complete. The banks had confirmed my rightful ownership of the trust accounts. Ms. Rivera had compiled irrefutable evidence of the will's validity and the improper distribution of probate assets, and we had documentation of the attempted fraud. All that remained was to present this information to my family and witness the unraveling of their carefully constructed narrative, a confrontation I had been preparing for mentally and emotionally for months. As I fell asleep, I felt a curious sense of calm. Tomorrow wouldn't be about revenge or even reclaiming assets. It would be about honoring Grandpa's wishes and standing firmly in the truth he had entrusted to me. Rather than meeting at Ms. Rivera's office as originally planned, I made a last-minute strategic decision that caught even my attorney by surprise. "I want to do this at Rebecca's apartment during one of her fundraising events," I explained. "She'll be surrounded by her social circle, feeling comfortable and in control. That's when the truth will have the most impact." Ms. Rivera raised her eyebrows but nodded slowly. "Psychologically, that's actually quite powerful. She won't expect a confrontation in her safe space, especially with witnesses, and she'll have nowhere to retreat." I texted Rebecca that evening. "I've been doing some thinking and would like to support your work. I'd like to attend your fundraiser this weekend if the invitation is still open." Her response came quickly, almost eagerly. "Of course, dear sister. I knew you'd come around eventually. Saturday, 7 p.m., cocktail attire. Mom and Dad will be so pleased you're finally supporting something meaningful." The calculated condescension in her message made my stomach turn, but I replied with matching false enthusiasm. The next step involved coordinating with the bank representatives who had been investigating my case. Mr. Dela Cruz agreed to be available by phone at precisely 8:30, the time when fundraising events typically transitioned from networking to formal presentations. The bank's fraud investigator provided a detailed summary document that Ms. Rivera helped me simplify into clear, undeniable talking points. By Saturday afternoon, everything was prepared. I dressed carefully in a simple black cocktail dress that projected both sophistication and appropriate event attire, securing a delicate diamond pendant that had been a law school graduation gift from Grandpa, something my parents couldn't claim as part of the estate, around my neck. I arrived at Rebecca's luxury Manhattan apartment at precisely 7:15, fashionably late but not enough to miss the crucial networking period. A glass of champagne in one hand and my phone pre-scheduled with calendar alerts for each phase of my plan in the other, I navigated through the crowd of well-dressed socialites and nonprofit executives. Rebecca's apartment had been transformed for the event, with catering staff circulating elegant hors d'oeuvre and a string quartet playing softly in the corner. I immediately spotted Grandpa's Chihuly sculpture prominently displayed in the entryway, a vibrant swirl of blue and gold glass that had always been his pride and joy. My sister spotted me from across the room, excusing herself from a conversation with what appeared to be potential donors to approach me with a performance of sisterly affection. "Alexandra, darling, I'm so glad you've finally come around." She embraced me lightly, careful not to spill her champagne. Family supporting family is everything, after all. The living room was decorated with enlarged photos of Rebecca at various field sites, artfully composed images of her looking compassionate while surrounded by grateful recipients of her organization's supposed generosity. On the bookshelf behind her desk, I spotted several of Grandpa's first edition business books, now serving as sophisticated decor, rather than the treasured resources he had intended them to be. Throughout the first hour, I maintained pleasant conversation, asking about her organization's work and complimenting her apartment as if nothing were amiss. Rebecca, clearly relieved by my apparent surrender, became increasingly animated, detailing her plans for expanding our impact across 3 continents, with the necessary resources we've recently secured. I noticed she was wearing a distinctive emerald bracelet I recognized from Grandpa's safe, a piece he had purchased to celebrate his first $1 million deal. When I complimented it, she responded with practiced nonchalance. Oh, this old thing? It was grandfather's, of course. I thought it should be worn rather than sitting in a safe somewhere. My parents arrived around 8 o'clock, my father immediately gravitating toward a group of potential investors, while my mother circulated among the social elite, Grandpa's watch still prominently displayed on her wrist. When she spotted me, her surprise was quickly masked with a tight smile and a brief embrace. Alexandra, I didn't expect to see you here. Finally taking an interest in your sister's important work? At precisely 8:25, as Rebecca prepared to begin her formal presentation to the gathered donors, my phone alarm vibrated silently in my hand. I excused myself to use the restroom, where I took 3 deep centering breaths before sending the prearranged text to Mr. Dela Cruz. Ready? Returning to the living room as Rebecca tapped a spoon against her glass to call for attention, I positioned myself near the front of the gathering, directly in her line of sight. Before we continue, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, there's something important Rebecca's donors should know about the funding of this organization. Rebecca's champagne glass paused halfway to her mouth. Alexandra, this isn't the time or place. Actually, it's exactly the right time and place, I smiled with a calmness that seemed to unnerve her. I've spent the past few months working with private banking institutions to untangle some concerning financial activities related to my grandfather's estate. My mother's face drained of color. What are you talking about? I reached into my clutch and removed a single folded document, the fraud investigation summary from the private bank. I'm talking about the fact that Grandpa made me the sole beneficiary of a $5 million trust years ago. Upon his death, that trust legally transferred to me. Not to the estate, not to Dad as executor, but directly to me as the designated beneficiary. My father pushed through the crowd, his expression hardening. Alexandra, this is inappropriate. We can discuss family matters privately. Interesting perspective, I replied, unfolding the document. The bank's fraud department has a different view. They've determined that the multiple attempts to access those accounts using forged documents constituted sophisticated financial fraud. Rebecca's composed facade finally cracked, alarm registering on her face. Dad, what is she talking about? I continued before my father could respond. Similarly, the Swiss bank has confirmed I am the sole beneficiary on Grandpa's investment portfolio, despite someone attempting to change that designation in his final weeks. With a signature, their verification department flagged as inconsistent with their records. My mother stood abruptly, hands shaking slightly as she gripped the back of a nearby chair. This is ridiculous. You're creating drama, as usual. Am I? I pulled out my phone, checking the time. It's 8:30. Mr. Dela Cruz from the private bank's fraud investigation unit is expecting my call to discuss their findings directly with my family, and perhaps with Rebecca's donors, who might be interested to know exactly where their contributions are going. The blood drained from my sister's face. You've involved the bank's fraud department? Alexandra, this is a family matter. My father hissed, aware of the curious glances from the other guests. It became more than a family matter when someone forged my signature and attempted to steal $5 million from accounts explicitly designated for me. I replied, dialing the number and putting the phone on speaker. Mr. Dela Cruz answered on the second ring, his professional voice filling the suddenly silent room. Good evening, Alexandra. Are your family members present as discussed? Yes, Mr. Dela Cruz. I'm here with my parents, James and Catherine Thompson, and my sister Rebecca. We're actually at a fundraising event for her organization. Good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Dela Cruz, Vice President of Security and Fraud Prevention at First Maritime Private Bank. I'm calling regarding the investigation into account activities following William Thompson's death on December 12th. My father attempted to interject with his authoritative CEO voice. Mr. Dela Cruz, there seems to be a misunderstanding. As executor of my father's estate, Mr. Dela Cruz cut him off firmly. Mr. Thompson, our records indicate your father established a special trust with Alexandra Thompson as the sole beneficiary in 2019. Such accounts bypass probate and transfer automatically to the designated beneficiary upon death. Our investigation has confirmed that the documents used to attempt access to these accounts after December 15th contained forged signatures and fraudulent identification materials. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the catering staff had paused to listen. Mr. De La Cruz continued, his voice matter-of-fact. Furthermore, the IP addresses used in these attempted accesses have been traced to devices registered to Rebecca Thompson. These findings have been documented and shared with our legal department, who are prepared to proceed with appropriate actions unless the matter is resolved privately. My mother's hand flew to her throat, fingers clutching Grandpa's watch. "This is a misunderstanding," she whispered. "James was only doing what William would have wanted." Mr. De La Cruz's response was measured but firm. "Mrs. Thompson, we also have on record several conversations between our branch manager and William Thompson, specifically confirming his intention for these accounts to transfer directly to Alexandra upon his death. These conversations were documented in our client management system as per our protocols for high-value trust designations. After answering a few more questions and confirming that the funds had been secured against further fraudulent attempts, Mr. De La Cruz concluded the call. "I trust this information helps clarify the situation, Alexandra. Please contact me if you need any further documentation or assistance." The room remained silent for several seconds after the call ended. The guests stood frozen, glasses halfway to lips, eyes wide as they witnessed the family drama unfold. My father stared at the phone as if it might explode, while my mother had sunk into a nearby chair. Rebecca's expression had transformed from alarm to calculation, likely assessing how this affected her reputation among her donors. Finally, one of the guests, a distinguished older woman wearing what appeared to be genuine pearls, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should give the Thompson family some privacy," she suggested, placing her champagne flute on a nearby table. One by one, the guests began making polite excuses and heading for the door, leaving behind half-eaten canapés and awkward goodbyes. When the last guest had departed, my father turned to me, his voice noticeably less confident. "Alexandra, surely we can handle this within the family. There's no need for banks and lawyers and fraud investigations in front of Rebecca's important contacts." I met his gaze directly. "I've already handled the financial accounts. First Maritime, the Swiss bank, and the Singapore institution have all blocked the fraudulent access attempts. Those funds are secured. Now we need to discuss Grandpa's business empire, which was restructured against his wishes and his personal property, particularly the art collection and first edition books, which were never intended for anyone but me." The carefully constructed facade of family unity crumbled visibly before my eyes. My father's authoritative posture slackened, my mother's hands trembled as she removed her designer glasses, and Rebecca's expression shifted from calculation to something resembling fear. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my mother attempted to salvage the situation. "Alexandra, regardless of some banking technicality, you must understand we were doing what was best for the entire family. Rebecca's work has global impact, and your career has always been so stable." I had anticipated this exact pivot, the attempt to reframe their actions as family-oriented rather than self-serving. "If that were true," I replied evenly, "why wasn't I consulted? Why the secret transfers, the intercepted mail, the forged signatures? Those aren't the actions of people making honest family decisions." My father cleared his throat, falling back on the businesslike tone he used when negotiating corporate mergers. "Perhaps we moved too quickly without proper communication. We can discuss a more equitable distribution moving forward." "That's not what this conversation is about," I said, maintaining eye contact. "This is about honoring Grandpa's explicit wishes, which were for me to receive his estate, wishes you actively worked to undermine." I turned to face Rebecca directly. "And you've been spending the money already, haven't you? The new Tesla, the European business trip, this lavish apartment renovation. What happened to the $2 million you lost in that fraudulent art investment scheme?" My sister's face flushed. "How could you possibly know about that?" "Banks are thorough when investigating fraud," I replied simply. "They traced the money that was diverted from Grandpa's accounts. You've been hemorrhaging cash on fake investments and an organization that appears to exist primarily on Instagram." Rebecca's expression hardened. "You've been investigating me? Your own sister?" I've been investigating what happened to my inheritance, I corrected her. Every discovery has only confirmed what I already knew. Grandpa wanted me to have his estate, took legal steps to ensure it would happen, and all of you conspired to redirect those assets against his wishes. My father abruptly stood, pacing toward the kitchen before turning back. This is getting out of hand. Alexandra, what exactly do you want? Money? Fine. We can arrange a payment from what remains of the estate. The condescension in his tone, as if he were still in control, still the authority deciding what crumbs might fall to me, ignited a spark of indignation I had suppressed for months. What I want is an explanation, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. I want to understand how the people who raised me could look me in the eye at Ms. Patel's office and say, "You're not ready for this responsibility," while stealing what was legally mine. My words hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't have a choice, Alexandra. We needed the money." Quote. The admission struck me like a physical blow. For what? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. My father's shoulders sagged as he returned to the living room. We've been in financial trouble for years. The market crash hit our investment properties hard, and I made some poor decisions trying to recover. We leveraged everything, maxed out credit lines, took loans we couldn't repay. Rebecca stared at her hands, refusing to meet my eyes as my father continued. Dad knew some of it. He loaned us money several times over the years. $3. $2 million, I supplied, recalling the loan documents Mr. Dela Cruz had mentioned, with signed agreements you never fulfilled. My mother's eyes widened. How could you possibly know that? The banks have been very thorough in their investigation, I replied simply. Those loan documents were in Grandpa's safety deposit box, the one you cleared out after his death. A heavy silence fell over the room. My father's next words emerged as a reluctant confession. When he updated his will, leaving everything to you, we panicked. We'd been counting on his estate to resolve our debts. Without it, we faced potential bankruptcy, maybe even criminal charges for some of the financial maneuvering I'd done to keep us afloat. So you decided to take what was legally mine, I concluded. And Rebecca, how does she factor into this? My sister finally looked up, a flicker of defiance in her expression. My organization was failing. The donors were starting to ask questions about where their money was going. Dad invested heavily in it to make it look legitimate. Loans I couldn't repay. When Grandpa died, they offered me a portion of the estate in exchange for keeping quiet about the family finances. The intricate web of financial desperation and deceit was finally becoming clear. And the Chihuly? I asked, looking pointedly at the sculpture still gleaming in the entryway. The books? The emerald bracelet? Rebecca touched the bracelet self-consciously. I always loved Grandfather's things. They lend credibility to my image. They also were specifically mentioned in the will as passing directly to me, I countered. You told me yourself countless times growing up how Grandpa and I shared the same boring interest in business books and art glass while you were out changing the world. Rebecca had no response to this, her fingers still lingering on the emerald bracelet. The room fell silent again, the remains of the fundraiser growing stale as decades of family history were rewritten before our eyes. The catering staff had discreetly vanished, sensing the family tension. After several moments, I spoke again, my voice softer but no less determined. Here's what's going to happen now. The trust funds are already secured. Those accounts have been protected against further fraudulent access attempts. For the business holdings and personal property, we have two options. I laid out the alternatives Ms. Rivera and I had prepared. Option 1. You provide a full accounting of all items from Grandpa's estate, return the art collection and any remaining personal effects, and compensate me for the fair market value of the business holdings, which were restructured without my consent as the named beneficiary. My father started to protest, but I held up my hand to continue. Option 2. My attorney files formal complaints in probate court, provides evidence of financial fraud to the authorities, and pursues full legal remedies, which would likely involve public proceedings and potential criminal charges for the banking violations. The threat of public exposure hung heavily in the air. My parents had built their social standing in New York over decades. The tech executive and his philanthropist wife, pillars of the community and the Manhattan charity circuit. Criminal fraud charges would devastate that carefully cultivated image. And for Rebecca, whose entire identity was built around her supposed humanitarian work, the exposure would be catastrophic. My mother was the first to break. The art collection can be returned immediately. I can have the books and other items packed by tomorrow. My father looked at her sharply, but she continued. James, it's over. We were wrong. And Alexandra knows everything. Turning back to me, she asked in a small voice, What about family connections? The holidays? Will we ever see you again? The question carried the weight of all that had been destroyed through their actions. I had considered this extensively in therapy with Dr. Chen, preparing for this exact moment. That depends on what happens next, I answered honestly. I'm not interested in punishing you or destroying our family completely. But trust has been broken in fundamental ways, and rebuilding it, if that's even possible, would require complete transparency, genuine remorse, and tangible actions to make this right. Rebecca pushed back her chair abruptly. This is blackmail. You're threatening us to get what you want. I met her gaze calmly. No, Rebecca. I'm offering a path forward that doesn't involve courts and criminal charges for what has already been done. That's not blackmail. It's mercy. The word landed like a stone in still water, ripples of its implications spreading across their faces. My father, the consummate negotiator, recognized the position they were in. We'll need time to arrange for the business compensation. The market has been volatile, and we've used some of those funds to clear debts. I'm aware, I replied. Ms. Rivera has prepared a structured settlement agreement that would allow monthly payments over 5 years with reasonable interest. It's far more generous than what a court would likely impose. As the reality of their situation settled in, my parents' expressions transformed from defensive to defeated. Rebecca removed the emerald bracelet with trembling fingers, placing it on the coffee table between us. A small but significant act of surrender. We never meant for things to go this far, my mother whispered. We thought we could fix our finances and make things right before anyone noticed. By stealing my inheritance? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. By telling me I wasn't ready for responsibility while you were driving the family finances into the ground. She had no answer for this. Eyes downcast as decades of maternal authority evaporated in the face of undeniable truth. My father, ever practical even in defeat, asked, What are your terms for the settlement agreement? We should understand exactly what you're proposing. I outlined the arrangement Ms. Rivera had prepared. Return of all art and personal effects. A detailed inventory of items already sold or distributed, monthly payments totaling the fair market value of the business holdings plus interest, and a signed acknowledgement of Grandpa's original intentions, and the improper actions taken to circumvent them. As my parents absorbed these terms, Rebecca abruptly stood. I need to make some calls. This affects my public image significantly. The naked self-interest in her statement, without a hint of remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing, confirmed what I had long suspected about my sister's character. As she left the room, my father sighed heavily. She over-leveraged herself based on what we promised from your grandfather's estate. This will be difficult for her. As difficult as it was for me to learn my family conspired to steal my inheritance, I asked quietly. The question hung in the air without answer. By the time the caterers returned to begin cleaning up, the confrontation had transformed into grudging negotiation. My parents requested 72 hours to consult with their own attorney before signing Ms. Rivera's agreement. I granted this reasonable request while making it clear that the bank's fraud investigations remained ongoing and could only be halted once a settlement was reached. As I prepared to leave, my mother followed me to the door, her composure finally cracking. Alexandra, will you ever forgive us? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. The question caught me off guard despite my extensive emotional preparation. I considered the woman before me. The mother who had raised me, taught me to ride a bike, attended my debate competitions, and also the woman who had looked me in the eye and said I wasn't ready for responsibility while helping orchestrate financial fraud. I don't know, I answered honestly, Forgiveness might be possible someday, but trust will take much longer to rebuild, if ever. As I rode the elevator down from Rebecca's luxury apartment, the weight of the confrontation finally hit me. Though physically and emotionally exhausted, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Not just for myself, but for Grandpa William, whose careful planning and faith in me had ultimately prevailed against those who sought to override his wishes. The unraveling truth had been painful, revealing a family built on shakier foundations than I had ever imagined. But in that pain came clarity, and, unexpectedly, a sense of liberation from familial obligations based on falsehood rather than love. The 6 months following that fateful fundraiser confrontation marked a period of profound transformation in my life. The legal resolution proceeded more smoothly than anticipated. My parents signed Ms. Rivera's settlement agreement after consulting their attorney, who likely advised them it was extraordinarily generous given the circumstances. The art collection was returned within days, each piece carefully wrapped and delivered to my apartment by a professional art handling service. Holding the Chihuly sculpture that had always reminded me of Grandpa's vibrant spirit, I felt a connection to him and the legacy he had entrusted to me. The financial recovery took longer, but progressed steadily. My parents made their first scheduled payment for the business holdings, and the banks completed their processes securing the trust accounts. The $5 million that Grandpa had hidden away, his insurance policy against exactly the scenario that had unfolded, was now fully under my control. As the dust settled on the legal and financial aspects, I faced the more challenging task of emotional recovery. The betrayal had shaken my understanding of family to its core, forcing me to re-examine every childhood memory through a new lens. With Dr. Chen's guidance, I began the painful work of grieving, not just for Grandpa, but for the family I had thought I had and the relationships that would never be the same. Grief isn't linear, Dr. Chen reminded me during one particularly difficult session. Some days you'll feel anger, others sadness, and occasionally unexpected moments of peace. All of these responses are valid. I established clear boundaries with my family, limiting communication to practical matters regarding the settlement agreement. My mother sent occasional texts attempting to re-establish casual conversation, which I answered politely but briefly. My father's communications remained strictly business-related, focused on documentation of payment transfers. Rebecca and I didn't speak at all. Her final words at the fundraiser confrontation had revealed all I needed to know about her priorities. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had quietly closed her foundation and taken a marketing position at a legitimate nonprofit, where she was under proper supervision and accountability. 3 months after the confrontation, I made good on the promise I had made to Grandpa's photo the night before the showdown. I used a small portion of the trust funds to launch the legal tech startup he had always encouraged me to pursue, a platform designed to help ordinary people understand and protect their inheritance rights through accessible legal information and tools. Working from a converted warehouse space in Oakland, I assembled a team of lawyers, software developers, and financial experts committed to democratizing estate planning. Our mission statement, displayed prominently on the wall of our main workspace, read, "Empowering individuals to protect their legacies and honor their loved ones' wishes." Each morning as I unlocked the office doors, I would touch the small replica of Grandpa's Chihuly sculpture I had commissioned for our reception area, drawing strength from the knowledge that I was building something he would have been proud of. Upon launching our beta platform, I received an email that made me pause. The sender was my father, writing from his personal account rather than the formal business address he used for settlement communications. "I saw the announcement of your startup launch," he wrote. "The platform you've created would have saved our family from disaster if it had existed when my father was planning his estate. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that what you're building matters. It might prevent other families from making our mistakes." The acknowledgement, however small, represented the first genuine moment of reflection I'd witnessed from any family member since the confrontation. As the business grew, I made 2 significant decisions. First, I established the William Thompson Fellowship for Ethical Business Leadership at Stanford, supporting graduate students committed to transparency and integrity in corporate governance. The fellowship would ensure Grandpa's values lived on in future business leaders long after his name had faded from corporate memory. Second, I began speaking at law schools about financial elder abuse and inheritance fraud. using my own story, with names and identifying details changed, to illustrate how even loving families can rationalize terrible choices when money and status are at stake. The work was profoundly healing, transforming my personal pain into something constructive that might help others avoid similar situations. As for the inheritance itself, I approached it with the same careful stewardship Grandpa had demonstrated throughout his life. I maintained his investment strategy with modern updates, lived within my means despite the substantial increase in my net worth, and used a portion to secure my future by purchasing a comfortable but modest home in Berkeley, with a dedicated office space for remote work. The art collection remained displayed throughout my home and office, each piece a tangible connection to my grandfather and the vision he had entrusted to me. 5 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my mother asking if I would meet her for coffee alone, without my father or Rebecca. After discussing it with Dr. Chen, I agreed, choosing a neutral location near Union Square rather than anywhere associated with family memories. She arrived looking older somehow, the confident socialite persona diminished. After awkward greetings, she placed a small package on the table between us. "I found these in the attic," she explained, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Letters your grandfather wrote to you over the years, ones he never sent. I thought you should have them." I accepted the package wordlessly, unsure what this gesture meant in our fractured relationship. "I've been seeing a therapist too," she continued, stirring her untouched coffee. "Trying to understand how things went so wrong, not just with your inheritance but with our family dynamics for years before that." This admission surprised me. My mother had always dismissed therapy as unnecessary navel-gazing for people without proper social support. "What have you learned?" I asked, genuinely curious despite my guardedness. She met my eyes directly for the first time. "That I've been jealous of your relationship with my father-in-law since you were a child. That I resented how he saw something in you that I couldn't or wouldn't see. That I've been compensating for my own insecurities by focusing all my attention on Rebecca because she was more like me, more social, more concerned with appearances." The raw honesty caught me off guard. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said quietly. "No," she agreed, "nothing excuses that. But I'm trying to understand it so I don't continue the pattern." We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon, not resolving everything, but beginning a different kind of conversation than we'd ever had before. I didn't leave with promises of reunion dinners or holiday celebrations, but with something perhaps more valuable, a glimpse of the woman behind the mother I thought I knew, and the possibility that genuine change might be possible, even if reconciliation remained distant. My father proved less capable of this kind of introspection. When I finally agreed to meet him 6 weeks later, he focused on practical matters, confirming payment schedules, and asking perfunctory questions about my business. The emotional dimension of our ruptured relationship remained unaddressed, locked behind the same stoic facade he had maintained throughout my childhood. As for Rebecca, our paths crossed only once in that first year, at a cousin's wedding where family obligation had brought us both. She avoided direct conversation, but I overheard her describing her career transition to relatives, carefully crafting a narrative that positioned her as a visionary who had completed her mission with her previous organization and moved on to broader impact opportunities. The final piece of my healing journey came unexpectedly through Grandpa's unsent letters that my mother had discovered. Written over decades, they revealed a man even more thoughtful and forward-thinking than I had realized. In one, dated shortly after he had established the secret trust, he wrote, "My dearest Alexandra, I'm taking steps today to secure your future in ways I hope you'll never need to know about. I've seen how families can fracture over material things once someone is gone. By creating this trust now, I'm trying to protect you from that potential pain. Your father and his wife have made financial decisions I don't agree with, and I worry about what might happen when I'm no longer here. This isn't about love or favoritism. It's about recognizing who will be the best steward of what I've built." Reading his words, I felt a profound sense of being seen and understood across the divide of death. He had anticipated the very betrayal that occurred, and had done everything in his power to protect me from it. On the anniversary of his death, I visited his grave alone, bringing a small arrangement of his favorite yellow roses. Sitting beside the headstone, I told him everything that had happened: the betrayal, the confrontation, the resolution, and my ongoing journey toward healing. "You prepared me for this in ways I didn't understand at the time," I said, tracing the engraved letters of his name. "The legal knowledge you encouraged, the independence you modeled, the careful planning you did, it all mattered more than I could have imagined." As I drove away from the cemetery, I reflected on the profound lessons this painful chapter had taught me. I had learned that financial literacy is not just about managing money, but about personal empowerment and protection. I had discovered that family relationships, like any others, must be based on mutual respect and honesty to endure. Most importantly, I had come to understand that true inheritance isn't measured in dollar amounts or material possessions, but in values, wisdom, and self-worth that can never be taken away. Today, 2 years after that fundraiser confrontation, I've built a life that honors my grandfather's legacy while creating my own path forward. The legal settlement continues according to schedule. My tech platform has helped thousands of families create transparent estate plans, and my speaking engagements have expanded to include financial literacy workshops for young professionals. My relationship with my parents exists in a careful, limited capacity that acknowledges our history without pretending it didn't happen. The wounds have healed enough to no longer dominate my daily thoughts, though the scars remain as permanent reminders of lessons hard learned. If my experience has taught me anything worth sharing, it's this: know your worth, understand your rights, and always keep copies of important documents. Financial knowledge isn't just for career advancement. It's a form of self-protection in a world where even those who should love you most might make decisions based on their own interests rather than yours. And if you're struggling with family betrayal or loss, remember that healing doesn't mean forgetting or even necessarily forgiving. It means building something new from the pieces left behind, something that might be differently shaped but can be whole and beautiful in its own right. So I ask you, have you ever experienced a betrayal that forced you to stand up for yourself in ways you never expected? Or have you had to redefine what family means to you beyond blood relationships? Share your stories in the comments. Your experiences might help someone else navigating similar difficult waters. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe so we can build a community of people supporting each other through life's unexpected challenges. And remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what's left to you. It's what you build from the strength you find within yourself when tested. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I wish you wisdom and courage on your own path forward. The overwhelming response to my story caught me completely by surprise. What began as a personal video sharing my inheritance journey blossomed into something far greater than I could have imagined. Within weeks, my inbox overflowed with messages from viewers facing similar situations: adult children wrestling with family betrayal, elderly individuals concerned about their wishes being honored, and professionals seeking guidance on protecting their assets. One message in particular stayed with me. It came from a woman named Diane, a retired teacher whose son had manipulated her into signing over her home. "Your video gave me the courage to speak to an attorney," she wrote. "Yesterday, I took back control of my property. At 72, I finally found my voice." These messages confirmed what Grandpa William had always believed: that financial empowerment isn't just about money. It's about dignity, agency, and the right to determine your own legacy. 3 years after that fateful confrontation in Rebecca's apartment, my life has evolved in ways I never could have predicted. The legal tech platform I launched with Grandpa's trust funds has grown into a respected industry leader, with offices in 5 cities and a team of 30 dedicated professionals. Our user base has expanded beyond individual estate planning to include small family businesses, nonprofit organizations, and community foundations, all entities where clear succession planning and financial transparency are essential. The William Thompson Fellowship has supported 12 graduate students so far, each committed to ethical business leadership. Watching these young minds develop innovative approaches to corporate governance while maintaining unwavering integrity has been one of my greatest joys. But perhaps the most meaningful development came from an unexpected quarter. 6 months ago, I received a call from Rebecca. "I'd like to meet," she said, her voice lacking the polished confidence I remembered. "There are things I need to say to you. In person." After consulting with Dr. Chen, who had become not just my therapist but a valued mentor, I agreed to meet Rebecca at a quiet cafe near Golden Gate Park. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully cultivated image of humanitarian importance. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "I've been in intensive therapy for the past year, and my counselor thinks it's important for me to make amends where possible. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I owe you the truth, and an apology that I should have given years ago." What followed was a raw, honest conversation, unlike any we'd ever shared as sisters. Rebecca revealed that she had been living a carefully constructed fiction for years before Grandpa's death. Her foundation had accomplished little beyond impressive photo opportunities, while she funneled donations into maintaining her lifestyle and social standing. "I was addicted to the image," she admitted, her voice breaking. "The admiration, the social media validation, the feeling of importance. When Mom and Dad offered me Grandpa's money, I didn't even hesitate. I convinced myself I deserved it more, because my work was changing the world while you were just making money." She paused, struggling visibly with her next words. "The worst part is that I knew it was wrong. I knew Grandpa wanted you to have everything. I was in the room once when he told Dad that you were the only one who understood the responsibility of wealth. I heard him say that I treated money like water, always flowing through my fingers without appreciation for its source. He was right." Her honesty stunned me into silence. This vulnerability from Rebecca, who had always maintained perfect composure, who had never admitted fault in anything, was entirely unexpected. "After the fraud investigation and the collapse of my foundation, I hit rock bottom," she continued. "I lost my apartment, most of my friends disappeared when the money did, and I had to move into a tiny studio in Queens. I was so angry at you at first, blaming you for destroying my life rather than acknowledging I had built it on lies." She took a shaky breath before continuing. "My therapist helped me see that my entire identity was built around being the favorite, Mom and Dad's golden child, the charming one, the one who made a difference. When that collapsed, I had to figure out who I actually was beneath all the performance. I finally found my voice." "And who are you, Rebecca?" She smiled sadly. "Still figuring that out. But I'm working as an administrative assistant at a real nonprofit now, one that actually builds schools in underserved communities. I do data entry and coordinate volunteers. It's humble work, but for the first time I can see tangible results from my efforts. And I'm taking accounting classes at night to understand money properly for the first time in my life." The Rebecca sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the sister who had flaunted her supposed importance while helping divert my inheritance. This version seemed more authentic than any I'd known in our 3 decades as sisters. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said, echoing words I'd heard from our mother years earlier. "But I wanted you to know that losing the money was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to develop substance beneath the style. And watching how you've used Grandpa's legacy, building something meaningful, helping others protect their rights, I finally understand why he chose you." Our conversation lasted hours, moving beyond apologies into genuine dialogue about our childhood, our parents' influence, and the different paths our lives had taken. We didn't leave as best friends or even close sisters, but we departed with something we'd never truly had before: honest mutual understanding. The reconciliation with Rebecca, limited and cautious as it was, opened an unexpected door for broader family healing. My parents, seeing that I was willing to meet with my sister, tentatively suggested a small family dinner at a neutral restaurant. After 5 years of minimal contact beyond settlement payments and occasional text messages, we gathered around a table as 4 individuals working to rebuild trust from the ground up. The conversation was awkward at times, punctuated by long silences and careful navigation around sensitive topics. But there were also moments of genuine connection. My father asking thoughtful questions about my business, my mother sharing her volunteer work with literacy programs, Rebecca speaking honestly about her accounting studies, and the challenges of starting over in her 30s. As we waited for dessert, my father cleared his throat with the familiar sound that had always preceded important announcements throughout my childhood. "I've completed the financial settlement payments," he said, sliding a folder across the table. 6 months ahead of schedule. The business holdings have been fully compensated for, with interest as agreed. I accepted the folder with a nod, appreciating the symbolic significance beyond the financial completion. "But there's something else I want to say," he continued, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "When your grandfather told me he was leaving everything to you, I was hurt and angry. I felt entitled to his assets as his son, regardless of the financial mistakes I'd made. That entitlement blinded me to the wisdom of his choice." He looked directly at me, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in years. "Watching what you've built with his legacy, the business you've created, the fellowship that carries his name, the thousands of families you've helped secure their futures. I understand now. You were the right choice. You honored his vision in ways I never could have." The admission clearly cost him, his face flushed with the effort of vulnerability that had always been so foreign to his nature. My mother reached across the table, hesitantly touching my hand. "We're proud of you, Alexandra. We should have said that more often throughout your life." The words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood and young adulthood arrived decades late, but still carried profound meaning. I didn't respond immediately, allowing the moment to settle into the space between us. "Thank you," I finally said. "That means more than you might realize." The dinner ended without dramatic declarations of renewed family bonds or promises of regular gatherings. Instead, we parted with tentative plans to meet again in a few months. A small, realistic step toward whatever new relationship might be possible. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the long, winding journey from that devastating day in Ms. Patel's office to this moment of cautious reconciliation. The betrayal had nearly broken me, yet it had also forced me to discover strengths I hadn't known I possessed. The loss of family as I understood it had created space for new connections based on authenticity rather than obligation. In the weeks following that dinner, I found myself contemplating the nature of resilience and healing. Working with Dr. Chen, I began developing a workshop series on financial trauma and recovery, incorporating both practical legal guidance and emotional support resources. The pilot program, offered through my company's nonprofit foundation, quickly reached capacity with a waiting list stretching months into the future. During one such workshop in Seattle, deliberately chosen as the city where my story began, a participant asked a question that stopped me mid-presentation. "How do you know when you've truly healed from financial betrayal? Is it when you no longer feel angry or when you can forgive the people who hurt you?" I paused, considering the deeply personal nature of the question. "I don't think healing has a clear endpoint," I finally answered. For me, it wasn't about the absence of pain, or even about forgiveness in the traditional sense. It was about reclaiming my power and rewriting the narrative. The betrayal no longer defines me. It's simply part of my story, not the whole story. The woman nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "I've been carrying this weight for so long. The idea that I can incorporate it into my story without letting it become my entire identity, that feels possible." That exchange crystallized something I had been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. Healing isn't about erasing the past or pretending the injury never occurred. It's about integration, weaving difficult experiences into the broader tapestry of our lives without allowing them to dominate the pattern. 6 months after that family dinner, I received an unexpected package from my father. Inside was Grandpa William's platinum watch, the one my mother had been wearing at the funeral and during our confrontation years earlier. The accompanying note was brief but meaningful. "This belongs with you. Your grandfather wore it every day while building his legacy. Now you should wear it while building yours." The gesture represented more than the return of a valuable object. It signified my father's acceptance of Grandpa's choice and his recognition of my right to carry forward the family legacy. I wore the watch the following week while signing papers to expand our company's educational initiatives. As I reviewed the documents establishing a new scholarship program for first-generation college students interested in financial law, I felt Grandpa's presence more strongly than I had since his passing. "We're doing good work," I whispered to myself, touching the watch face gently. just like you taught me. The story of my inheritance battle unexpectedly found its way into academic circles when a law professor from Stanford contacted me about featuring the case, with names changed and identifying details removed, in a textbook on modern estate disputes. After careful consideration and consultation with Ms. Rivera, I agreed, recognizing the educational value for future lawyers and judges. The professor invited me to speak to her class, creating an opportunity to address the next generation of legal professionals about the human elements that often get overlooked in estate law. Beyond the statutes and precedents, remember that you're dealing with families experiencing one of their most vulnerable moments, I told the room of attentive students. The technical aspects of inheritance law are important, but so is understanding the psychological dynamics at play when money, grief, and family history collide. After the lecture, a young woman approached me, her expression serious. My grandfather is in declining health, and I'm already seeing family members positioning themselves around his assets, she said quietly. Your story helped me recognize the warning signs. I've encouraged him to work with an estate attorney to ensure his wishes are clearly documented and legally protected. Each such encounter reinforced my belief in the importance of sharing what I had learned through my painful experience. The knowledge that my story might help others avoid similar pain gave purpose to what had often felt like senseless suffering. On the 5th anniversary of Grandpa's death, I organized a different kind of memorial. Rather than visiting his grave alone, I hosted a small gathering at my home, inviting the fellows from the William Thompson Fellowship Program, key team members from my company, and, in a step that would have been unimaginable years earlier, my parents and Rebecca. The evening wasn't about mourning what was lost, but celebrating what had been created from Grandpa's legacy. As we shared stories and raised glasses to his memory, I realized that his true gift hadn't been the financial assets, but the vision and values he had instilled in me. The understanding that wealth carries responsibility, that integrity matters more than appearances, and that true success lies in creating something meaningful that outlasts you. My mother, watching me host the event with quiet confidence, pulled me aside as guests were departing. He would be so proud of you, she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Not just for the business success, but for how you've handled everything, including us. You've shown more grace than we deserved. I learned resilience from both of you, I replied honestly. Not in the way you might have intended to teach it, but the lesson was valuable nonetheless. She laughed softly at that, a genuine laugh, without pretense or social performance. I suppose that's fair. We did make you strong, even if it was by giving you mountains to climb. That night, after everyone had gone and I sat alone in my garden beneath a star-filled sky, I felt a sense of completion that had eluded me since Grandpa's passing. The settlement was paid, the business was thriving, and the family had found a new, more authentic way to exist. Not perfect, not what I had once imagined, but real and sustainable in its careful boundaries and earned trust. The secret $5 million trust that had been Grandpa's insurance policy had grown substantially under my management. Beyond funding my company's launch, it now supported educational initiatives, legal aid programs for vulnerable elders, and research into preventing financial exploitation. The money that my sister had lost through poor decisions and fake investments had been reclaimed and redirected toward creating genuine impact. As my platform expanded its reach internationally and my speaking engagements brought me to audiences across the country, I found myself repeating certain core messages that had emerged from my experience. Financial literacy isn't just about understanding investments or saving for retirement. It's about recognizing the emotional and psychological dimensions of money in your life and relationships. Clear documentation and legal protections aren't signs of distrust. They're acts of love that prevent confusion and conflict when emotions are running high. Recovery from betrayal doesn't follow a straight line. Some days you'll feel empowered, others you'll be haunted by what happened. Both responses are valid parts of the healing journey. The wisdom I shared wasn't theoretical. It had been earned through tears, sleepless nights, and the painstaking work of rebuilding my sense of self and family after devastating betrayal. That hard-won authenticity resonated with audiences in a way that polished professional advice often couldn't. 6 years after discovering the hidden trust fund, I finally took the step Grandpa had urged in his final letter to me. Using a portion of the investment returns, I purchased a small tech startup developing innovative estate planning tools for blended families and non-traditional households. The acquisition expanded our company's capabilities while staying true to our mission of making inheritance planning accessible to everyone, regardless of family structure or financial complexity. The day we announced the acquisition, Rebecca sent a text that made me smile. Grandpa would say you're a chip off the old block. He'd be right. The journey through inheritance betrayal had transformed me in ways both painful and profound. I had lost the family I thought I had, but gained a clearer understanding of who I truly was. I had experienced the worst of human nature: greed, deception, manipulation, but also witnessed the possibility of genuine change and redemption. I had been broken by betrayal but rebuilt myself into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. Today, as I look at the growing impact of the company Grandpa's legacy helped create, I understand that inheritance is about far more than money or property. It's about values that transcend generations, lessons that shape character, and the courage to stand firm in your truth, even when those closest to you try to rewrite it. For those of you watching who may be facing your own battles over inheritance or family betrayal, I want you to know this: your worth isn't determined by what others try to take from you. Your strength lies not in never being knocked down, but in how you rise again. And your legacy isn't confined to what you leave behind. It's also defined by how you transform what was left to you. The most valuable inheritance isn't always listed in the will or stored in bank accounts. Sometimes it's found in the resilience you discover when tested, the boundaries you learn to establish, and the authentic self you reclaim when false family narratives fall away. If you've connected with my story, I encourage you to share your own experiences in the comments below. Our collective wisdom creates a resource more valuable than any financial inheritance, a community of support for those navigating similar painful journeys. Remember that healing isn't about returning to who you were before the betrayal. It's about becoming someone new, someone who carries the scars with dignity but isn't defined by them, someone who has transformed pain into purpose and loss into legacy. $5 million may have been what my sister lost, but what I found through this journey was ultimately far more valuable: my voice, my strength, and my capacity to create meaning from even the most painful chapters of life. Thank you for walking this path with me. If you found value in my story, please subscribe to join our community of resilient individuals supporting each other through life's unexpected challenges. Together, we can transform inherited pain into collective wisdom that benefits generations to come. This is Alex Thompson, signing off with gratitude for your time and attention. May your own inheritance, whatever form it takes, become a foundation for growth rather than a source of division. And may you always remember that the most important legacy isn't what's left to you, but what you choose to build with it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.